My name is Becky Haigler. I'm the daughter of Dick and Mary Ruth Carter, and today is my daddy's 89th birthday. And he's agreed to let us interview him about his life. Sorry. Okay, Daddy. So you were born 89 years ago today.
Well, that's
Who were your parents?
William R.V. Carter and Minnie Edna Rankin Carter.
And so you were born, again, 89 years ago today. Where were you born?
I was born on the family farm in Beaver County, Oklahoma.
And how many siblings were in the family when you were born?
Let's see, there were 4 ahead of me, so I was the number 5.
Okay. And there were 3 more that came later.
That's right.
And all Nanny's children lived to adulthood.
Yes. In fact, one is still alive. She's 101 years old.
Well, there are 3 of you, 3 of the 8 still alive.
Yes.
When did the family move into town from the farm?
I think that was about 1934, thereabouts. I know we were there in 35, so.
What do you remember about the building of that house in Hardesty?
Well, Dad had gone earlier and had built a basement, and we lived in there. The house was built with brick left over from a new school building that WPA had built there in Hardesty, and he got the excess brick and had the house built.
Were there many other brick houses in town?
No. I only remember one. I'm sure there were more than that, but I remember one other one.
So, had you started to school before the family moved to town?
No, I wasn't old enough to start.
So you went all your school in that red brick school that's still there?
Yes.
And so you lived really close to the school, so you didn't have to walk a mile uphill to get to school when you were a kid.
I walked across a vacant half a block and I was at school.
So I guess you were probably always walking with siblings.
No. I don't remember ever walking with siblings to school.
And did you all go over to the school playground to play then?
Yes, we went over there after school and on Saturdays.
Well, tell us about leaving school to join the Marines. What was going on and how come you left school?
Well, I didn't want to get drafted into the Army. I wanted to be a Marine. And so I had to join before I reached my 18th birthday, or I would have had to register for the draft. My mother wouldn't sign for me to enlist unless I had a high school diploma, because my older brother had left school to join the Army and he never did go back to school.
Well, so did you got your diploma early or you had to go back and get it?
While I was in boot camp, I had gone to summer school to earn some extra credit, trying to get a degree, diploma before I left. And while I was in boot camp, the school board members, I just liked this one credit, decided that I had probably earned a credit in field sanitation, they told me. So they gave me a diploma.
So where were you as a Marine?
Well, I went through boot camp at Paris Island, and then I went up to Camp Lejeune for combat infantry training. We were training to invade Japan, although we didn't know it was 18 years old. Then, after the war ended, they sent Marines to China to guard the railroads against the communists. But since I was not what would you say, not a regular, I did not have I had not enlisted for a certain time. They were taking people who had, well, I don't know what to say, who had regularly enlisted. They knew when they could, how long they could keep them. And I was a reservist. They didn't send me out to China. I stayed in California.
Okay. So you were fortunate enough not to go overseas.
Well, looking back on it, I know I was fortunate enough, but I was disappointed.
At the time. So you came back to Oklahoma after you were discharged from the Marines.
Yes. And enrolled in college under PL 46 called the GI Bill. And this was in this fall of 1946.
So, were you living on campus in Goodwell?
Yes, I lived in the dormitory, the boys' dormitory on campus.
You were telling me about some of the classes you were taking.
Well, they were pretty much standard. I took chemistry and physics because I liked that, and struggled with Miss Ethel Holter in English, as I remember, and Miss Muller in history. These were great ladies.
When did you take the flying class?
I must have been when I was a sophomore. Mm-hmm. So it started in 47 probably.
Well, tell us about meeting Mother at the college.
Well, my roommate knew her. The cafeteria at that time was in the basement of one of the buildings, and we were, my roommate and I and another fellow were already down at the bottom of the stairs waiting to go through the food line, and Bill turned around and looked, and there she stood up on the stairs. And I looked at her, and I was immediately attracted to her. It's a pretty girl. And so he said he knew her, and he arranged an introduction.
Well, go back a little bit more and tell us about when you were growing up. I know your mother was a Christian. What was the role of faith in your household when you were growing up?
Well, as you said, my mother was a Christian. My dad never went to church that I knew. He was a good man, but he had not made a profession of faith. He didn't identify himself in any way as a Christian. So she was the spiritual leader of the family.
Did she take you all to church?
Well, she walked us across the block. Wasn't very far.
And so, when did you become a Christian?
In the spring, I believe, must have been 47. I remember I had been considered myself, I guess. Well, I went to church because my mother took me, but there was the spring of 47 when I went to an altar and actually experienced meeting the Lord and realizing that my sins were forgiven.
So, you and Mother got married when you were both in college, and then you lived in married student housing for a while.
Yeah, and old barracks buildings they had brought on campus and converted into student housing, married student housing. Had 2 rooms and a bath.
Maybe 2 bedrooms and some living area?
No,
No?
2 rooms.
Oh, okay. Mother thinks it was a little bit bigger than you remember it,
Oh,
but
maybe so.
So I was born while you were living in married student housing,
Yes,
and you graduated with a degree in,
I have a bachelor's in math and a minor in chemistry.
and so what did you do when you graduated?
Well, let's see. Just at that time, Mary Ruth's mother died. And since we didn't have a home, I'd been teaching prior to graduating, trying, to make some money. And so we had no place to live. And so we went to Border to be with her father because he was alone there.
So after graduation, you taught in Colorado for a while, though.
I taught before graduation. The GI Bill had limitations, and I used mine all up before I graduated, and so I had to get out and get a job. And they hired me over in Colorado. One of my friends in college, his father was superintendent of schools at Pritchett in southeastern Colorado. So he got me on with an emergency, certificate. So I taught up there a couple of years while I was still looking to get a degree.
Okay. I don't think I ever heard that part of the story before.
Well, you weren't very big.
Nope. Okay, so after Mother's mother died, we moved to Borger. And tell us about your work there.
Well, my brother-in-law, R.L. Lowe, was a manager of the Southwestern Public Service Company's office in Groover. And he liked the company, and he told me I should go there to apply for a job in Borger. So I went up there, and they hired me. And as a junior engineer, I didn't have an engineering degree, but most, and I'm not denigrating the business, but most utility engineering is cookbook engineering. You're not doing anything different, you're going by somebody's book. So I could do that. And so I worked there for a while as a distribution engineer.
Did you start as a lineman, or that was just part of the work from time to time to be out on the lines?
No, I never was a lineman.
But you had to go out sometimes.
Well, yeah, I'd have to go out and to see if somebody needed service. I'd have to go there and see what was going to be required. And And I'd go back and write up a work order to, build a half a mile of line or put up a transformer bank or whatever was gonna be needed. But I didn't, it was all bookwork.
Okay. And so while we lived in Borger, Dan was born. And you also taught some while we were there, while you were working for public service.
Well, I taught a semester or so at Frank Phillips College. I don't remember teaching any other place while I was in Borger.
And then we came to move to Amarillo. That was 55, I think.
56, February 56 we moved.
So how come us to move over here?
Well, it's a long story. Southwestern Public Service is made up of parts of a great many smaller companies, city utilities and so on. They put it together, and their rates were, I wouldn't say a mess, they were, well, if you were in Roswell and you owned a grocery store, you would pay on a certain rate scale. If you moved up to Border, or same grocery chain, everything else, it'd be a different rate. The rates were different because the company was made up of other companies, and so they were gonna get them all together. And Burl Springer was the rate manager, and somebody looked at my resume and saw that I was a so-called mathematician, and so they transferred me over to Amarillo to help him try to get, I don't want to say rationality, but unity out of the rate system. So together, we worked for quite some time to come up with a rate system that was the same in different towns throughout our system, which was quite an operation.
So when did the company start using computers to keep track of things like that?
I think it was in '69. I know we'd have to go to Dallas to go to school to learn how to use the computer. Put the billing system on there, and it, of course, that made things a lot easier for looking at our own business. We could analyze things quicker since we had all of our records on the computer.
When did you get interested in archaeology?
I don't even know. Well, of course, I guess as a kid, I was always interested in looking for arrowheads and things like that. We didn't know the word archaeology. Oh, it was in 57. Some friends of ours were, I forgot, oh, they had a rock club, they called it. They're lapidarists. They made jewelry out of stones and so on. And we were at one of their meetings some evening, and Pollyanna Hughes, she was Jack's first wife, came to that meeting looking for some people who would be interested in working in digging a site over by Border. And so we were interested in that. I guess that's when we got it involved in archaeology. This would have been 1957, I think.
So you started working with the Norpan Archaeological Society.
Yeah, that was, we organized one.
I remember us going out on, seemed like every Saturday of the summer for a couple of years.
Yeah, well, we get up early and drive over. We were working on sites over by Border, and we wanted to get over there early before it got too hot. And, well, let's see, by that time Dan was big enough to go to. Yeah, that's when Dan made his wise observation. He said, well, I guess when Becky and I grow up, we'll be archaeologists. All they do is go around and pick up rocks and say, nope, and throw them back down.
So you continue to be associated with folks around here that are amateur and professional archaeologists.
Oh, yes. Yes, for several years we were actively engaged in excavations with the club. Mostly it was salvage archaeology. A road or a pipeline was about to destroy an archaeological site, by building across it. And so we would go out there, and the museum at Canyon didn't have enough funds to take care of all that kind of stuff. So we sort of filled in for them, and we could prove if it was worth excavating, then they could come on and do it, or if it was just a thin layer or something, we could also show that, and it wouldn't hurt it if they dug it up.
Well, we can probably see in the video over your head some of your carving, some of your canes and staffs and so on. How long have you been carving?
Well, I guess whittling all my life, and I don't know when it became carving. The staffs you see, I think were first in 89, the first one up there. I discovered the John C. Campbell Folk School in Western North Carolina had wood carving projects. And I went there first in 89, made my first staff with an instructor from Florida. So I went with him up through 03. He died, and that was it. He was going to be his last year with 04, and then he didn't make it. And in the interim, my brother Joe and I had gone to wood carving classes, instructions, Creed, Colorado, and what's the one in Arkansas?
Rogers?
It's near Rogers, but I can't say the name of it. Anyway, every summer they would have wood carving seminars. You could go and get instruction.
And you're still part of the wood carvers here.
Well, we have a club here now, of course, and they bring in instructors at different times in the year, during the year. We meet once a month and whittle and talk, and some of our local members then might present a project that he'd been working on, show how the rest of us could do it. It's a great group.
Well, let's go backward a little bit to, you became a Christian about the time that you and Mother married. And then when you moved to Borger to be with Grampa Neufeld, you were attending the Assembly of God Church in Borger and stayed with the Assemblies of God when we came to Amarillo. Tell us some about your different avenues of service in the church.
Well, when I was in Border, we was taught 12-year-old boys in Sunday school, done that. And after we came over here, I don't remember. Somehow my wife, Mary Ruth, and I got to be team teaching adult Sunday school class, which we've been doing now for 40 years, I think.
Well, and before that, you taught teenage boys here, I remember.
Yes.
And you were a deacon in the church.
Yes, I was a deacon here. In fact, I was a point of pride, if such. I think I was one of the signers of the bond that provided for building the what's now the present Assembly of God Church out on Bell Avenue. But we left the assemblies before that building was put up. And over a period of time, we became members of Covenant Presbyterian, or we've been attending since the fall of 1980, I believe. So 35 years we've been going over there. And I've been an elder there.
What was your involvement in the charismatic renewal?
Well, I guess maybe we influenced quite a few people there.
Well, start out with full gospel.
Because maybe we were I don't want to say not influential, but well, one fella, in fact, he was the vice president of our company. He and I were going one evening toward a meeting of some kind, and he said, "You know, you're the first one of those Pentecostals I ever knew that I didn't think was crazy." So I guess that was a compliment.
I guess that's what you call influence, huh?
I don't know.
Talk about the gospel businessmen. Yeah.
Well,
Charismatic.
that renewal you're speaking of, that brought a lot of people from other denominations, non-Pentecostal denominations, to understand a whole lot more about the working of the Holy Spirit in the church, and there were lots of good things came out of that. Of course, there were some oddballs in there too that sometimes gave it a bad name, but overall, if you look at the results, there are charismatic groups in nearly all the major denominations now.
And one of the groups that helped bring that about was the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship International.
Oh yeah, that was a great movement. And because these were lay people, not professional Christians, if you understand me, just plain people who had gotten saved and their lives changed, and they would tell folks about. It was a great movement that I think accomplished a lot in the church.
And you helped found the local chapter.
I guess I found it, helped found it. one of the early members anyway. I don't remember who actually started it in our area.
And then from Full Gospel Businessmen, you all got involved with a bunch of charismatic Catholics.
Yeah, that was interesting. Someone, I can't remember who it was, one of the members of our church or some other charismatic, we heard about those charismatic Catholics, and he said, we ought to go over and see what they are. And I don't know whether I didn't get to go anyway. I remember him telling me afterwards, he said, you know, that's the same Holy Spirit we've got. He recognized it. It brought about of course, there was friction with the old line churches. Some of them didn't like those charismatics coming in, and I don't know whether any of them were disruptive or not, but it was sort of a scary thing for them because they hadn't been used to that. But a lot of folks were saved.
So there were a lot of years while you were still in the Assemblies of God church that you were hanging out with these Christians from other kinds of churches and traveling around with charismatic Catholics and going to Mass every morning. Tell us about that.
Well, it was on the way to work, so we'd go to Mass in the morning, because we like to be with those people. We'd have a little prayer and then we'd go on to work. I don't know. Well, one of the priests at St. Mary's, now I can't say his name. Anyway, he was very welcoming, and I think he even recognized that it was having a good effect on those Catholics too.
So how did you end up in a Presbyterian church?
Let's see. Oh, well, I guess I was a deacon in the assemblies. Anyway, there was some unhappiness there. The pastor, some people had it in for the pastor, and they kept bugging him, and I guess I came home from a deacon's meeting one time and told Mary Ruth, the joy has gone out of it. She says, it's time to get out. And my friend Harold Taylor was a Presbyterian, and the pastor over at Covenant Church at that time was a charismatic, a very respected, fine gentleman. And so we just went over there in September of 1980. Been there ever since.
Well, I remember when we moved to Amarillo, we moved to the house on Ong Street,
Yeah.
and we lived there about 7 years or so.
Yeah, we lived there 7 years.
And then we tried to move out to the country, but that didn't work out. Well, not permanently.
We sold our house on Long Street and rented a house from Tucson for a year, and then we wanted to build out. We bought some land out west of Lake Tanglewood, and we wanted to build out there, but we couldn't get a loan because the banks didn't want to back something out there that they couldn't sell if they had to repo it. how long we lived out there. Well, during that time that you went to college, I guess. And you got married while we were out there
Yeah.
in that house that we were renting.
And so then you finally gave up that project and moved back to town over on Crockett for a couple years before you got this house.
Was it on Crockett?
I think so, over there at 24th.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we came here in 1st of July 1968 to this house. God has been good to us. Blessed our family.
Yep. So all your grandchildren were first brought home to this house as the family house, so that's what all of them know as the homestead.
Yeah, I'll just tell you about Dan getting saved. I was at some kind of convention up in New Mexico, and I guess I got back home and he called me and said, "Dad, I'm in jail." That isn't my story, but it's his story. He and Denise were, he was in school at Nacogdoches, Stephen F. Austin. They had a little house that they were renting out from town, and they were renting their room to one of his friends from Amarillo who was dealing marijuana. And when the sheriff raided them, he didn't make any fine point about who was guilty. He just took them all and threw them in jail. So that's a colorful tale that Denise can tell her Sunday school class.
Well, but tell about what you did then after he called.
Well, I tried to figure, I guess some way to get him out. I didn't have enough money to bail him out, but Denise's dad did. But some Baptist preacher came to minister to him in a church, and I guess that's. But Dan had been saved. The Baptists don't like that, but he'd fallen away. And as he came back then, I guess, well, there were a jailhouse conviction.
Well, you and Mother have always had a great gift of hospitality.
Well, my mother sure has. And my wife. I remember my mother, our house in Hardesty. If you've never been there, no house in Hardesty is more than 2 blocks from the railroad. So during the Depression, we'd see people riding the rails, whole families. And I'd come home to supper and there'd be some old bearded guy there eating, and I'd think some old uncle. Turned out it was a bum my dad had found on the railroad. Brought him home to feed him. And Mom always, I guess she welcomed him because sometimes I think they pass the word. If you go over there, you get something to eat.
Well, I know you did a whole interview for the Dust Bowl film that was on TV a while
Yeah, I
back.
remember that.
How would you say the Dust Bowl days impacted your family?
Well, we were blessed, and it didn't affect us like it did a lot of people because my dad had a job. He was a rural mail carrier, and it wasn't plush living, but it was a regular income, and so we didn't suffer like a lot of our neighbors. And I don't know. I know that Dad was a very generous man, and he helped people. I don't know, he helped a lot of them I didn't know about. But I'm sure they were good neighbors to their neighbors. Of course, a lot of my mother's brothers, she had 5 or 6 brothers, were like the other folks, they went to California during the Dust Bowl to find work. They were genuine Okies. After World War II, when I was stationed out in California, I went up there by Sacramento where a lot of our relatives had settled and visited them, and one of my older, I think it was a cousin, said one reason the Californians didn't like those Okies was that they would come up there and get the jobs because they were hard workers. And so they displaced some of the Californians that way. And of course, that didn't create a loving feeling between the two groups.
Well, tell us some about the kinds of games and pastimes you and your brothers and sisters had growing up.
Well, I don't know. We played games. When we lived on the farm up until I was about 5, of course, that was great. We could go out in the pasture. We were, a little creek ran just below our place there. We could go wade in the water, seine for minnows. I guess we probably played games, tag and Red Rover and things like that, but I don't remember.
What do you remember about toys?
Well, I don't remember. Well, after we moved to town, I can remember a couple of Christmases when one time I got a metal airplane that I thought was great to just play with, carry around. I guess we weren't too spoiled with toys. Too many kids.
Did you have tops or wagons?
Oh yeah, we
or-
played with tops. That was a great thing.
Seems like I remember a picture of you in a wagon.
I was on the farm, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one. I don't remember that. I remember living on the farm. One time, well then, my Uncle Brad, they lived in Levita, and when he died, left his wife and 3 kids, I believe, just there. So Dad just went up there and got them and brought them to Oklahoma. And I don't know where they lived, but Grandma had a little sod house, and I think maybe some of them lived with her. Anyway, he brought them there so he could look after them. And Bert, he was a cousin just older than me. We played together one time. An event I remember, I suppose it was his idea. We gathered all the eggs early. Mom would gather eggs I don't know what time of day, I guess afternoon. Anyway, Bert and I got out there and gathered them all and laid them in a neat row and put a board over them and jumped on the board. Boy, really flattened them too. That wasn't very popular.
Did you get a whipping for that?
I don't remember it.
Well, did you have books at home or just at school?
I don't remember any books at home. There may have been some, but I don't remember. All we got was the funny papers. We get them on Monday. I guess the paper came out of Oklahoma City and couldn't get it till the next day when a train ran by. That was always a great event when we got the funny papers.
Do you remember how old you were when your family got a radio?
No.
How about telephone?
Well, when we lived on the farm, we had a telephone. It was on the wall. And, I don't guess there was a central office. Everybody just had the rings, so many rings, that was you. And if you wanted to, you could get on and listen to the neighbors when they talked. Yeah, that was a marvelous thing. You could talk to people a long way off.
And for a while, your grandma lived with you.
What?
Said your grandma lived with you for a while.
Yes. Well, there's, after we got the house built in Hardesty, it's had one bedroom, a little bitty bedroom, and in the basement there were bedrooms. And I remember hearing my dad, the place didn't have plumbing or anything, and so he was gonna put in a bathroom. And I remember hearing him, I was just telling another man there in town, we're putting in a bathroom, and he said, sort of apologetically, I wouldn't have done it, but my mother is coming to live with us. He didn't want the guy to think he was putting on airs, I guess. But anyway, so we got modern plumbing, because Grandma was coming. And she lived with us until Oklahoma used to have an old age pension that you didn't have to do anything, you just had to get old and you could get a pension. So when Grandma got old enough to get a pension, Uncle Ed and Emma were happy to take her in. So then she moved out of our house.
Tell us some more about some of the traveling you and Mother have done.
Oh, that we have done?
Uh-huh.
Well, mostly it was just, in the summertime, we would go to Colorado. Because Grandma and someone had lived at Levita, so Dad had friends at Levita. From the time my Uncle Brad lived up there and worked in the mines, Dad knew people. And he'd get 15 days vacation from his mail carrying job every summer. And we would go to southern Colorado. We didn't realize how fortunate we were. This was in the Dust Bowl days, and here we were going to the mountains. And we just did it all the time. Looking back at it, we lived in a tent, we camped. We'd been roughing it, but it was really something in those times. We visited visit his friends and we just go off up on the hills and camp and fish. And then we'd have to go back to the Panhandle where it was dry and dirty.
And then after you married, what kind of traveling have you and Mother been able to do?
Well, what have we done? And we went to, on purpose, where have we traveled to? Oh, we've gone to, sometimes we go to church conventions, I guess you'd say, in not a whole lot.
Well, you used to go, you mentioned church conventions, you used to go to the Full Gospel Businessmen's conventions and to the Catholic Charismatic conferences.
Yeah, and we went to one year they had this big one in Kansas City. Can't remember what year that was.
76.
Mother says 76.
Okay, that was a huge thing. There were Catholic bishops there. It was an ecumenical deal. They had a big central meeting, and then of course there were little subgroups all over town. You know, during the day you could go meet with this one or that one, and that was quite an adventure. I wrote a short, summarizing the episode of the Dancing Cardinal, I called it. Anyway, during one of the meetings, some cardinal was there on the platform, and I don't know if he danced or not. He may have stood up and waved his arm.
Well, when did you buy your first RV?
I don't remember.
I think it was 82 because I can remember you coming for my graduation from Tech and going out to look at it.
It was a little Dodge truck thing. The bed was a converted couch. It wasn't very big. I don't remember the year. And then the last one we bought new in 1995, that we just gave away here a while back.
So where all did you go in your RVs?
Well, I remember we went when we were retired. What was that, 89? We went to a tin container convention, tin container collectors convention. I think it was in San Diego. We took our RV, went up there for that, and then we went up the coast all the way up to British Columbia, and then went home and stopped and visited relatives up in the Sacramento area, and then we went east through Canada, clear down to, I think we came into upstate New York and that thing. We were going 7 weeks that time. It was the longest trip we ever took in an RV.
And you used to take it to the folk school.
Oh yes, every fall we'd go to the John C. Camel Folk School in western North Carolina from 89 through 04. 15 years. I got 13 canes.
And you went out of the country a couple of times.
Where did we go?
Well, you went to Scotland.
Oh yeah. Trying to remember how we wound up there.
I think Mother
Oh,
was
we went-
taking a class and then you did some touristy stuff with it.
Well, we went to London, I remember that, and then we rode the Scotsman, whatever they call the fast train from London up to Edinburgh. I don't remember what I did while she was in class.
You took a history class.
She says you took a history class.
Oh, yeah, history. And we were there over the 4th of July of that year, I guess, because they commissioned me to get fireworks. I guess the British people don't have like we did. All I ever did was found was the sparklers.
And y'all came to visit us in Hawaii.
Yeah, when Carrie was born, I remember that.
We made one trip just to London, but that was our
Separate.
base, and we went down to Bath and Stonehenge and those places too.
Oh, yeah, I remember going to Stonehenge. I got some rocks. Didn't get them from the hinge, but I got them from there. Yeah, I remember Edinburgh Castle. That was a very interesting tour. They had I believe it was in Edinburgh, had a camera obscura, I believe, Dave, you know, the camera obscura is? Maybe I'm saying it wrong. Doesn't have a lens. If you just take a box and poke a pinhole in it, it'll work like a lens. And they have a big one there. You could go in the room and it would, I don't remember, it turned or it had one of you, but anyway, it would well, in fact, you can do it right here, just through the window. You could bring a picture of the outside world at it and put it up on the wall. Wasn't anything there but a hole.